thank you to you and your team for being here today. The last time that we spoke, we discussed the challenges with the unemployment compensation system during the pandemic. And one of the biggest issues that you have yet to discuss today was fraud. And not just the fraudulent claims, but we also had people's personal bank information being changed without their knowledge or consent. Most instances, people, they only noticed when they did not receive their benefits. So thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars in benefits were handed out to fraudsters. And I've heard you echo the Revenue Secretary's concerns about the softening of the economy. Could there be an economic downturn? Being prepared for a potential increase in people who are unemployed. But I also want to hearken back to testimony that this committee has received from the Auditor General, and that is that for every dollar we lose in fraud, we're usually only able to get pennies back on that dollar. So has the agency developed an anti-fraud strategy or taken any steps following the pandemic to address UC fraud risks and protect program integrity? And if you have, does that strategy involve the use of technology, things like analytics to combat identity theft? What has transpired?
So we do have multi-factor identification at the beginning of claims, and ID.me is part of it.
I appreciate that because previously a decision was made by your predecessor to not turn on that multi-factor authentication. So thank you for taking that step.
So we are dealing with fraud with the best technology we have available. There's only so much we're really able to talk about in a public forum about the protocol that's in place. Maria can give us a little more detail on the implementation of any new fraud measures since last you spoke with the agency.
Sure, thank you. Senator, you're specifically talking about fraud in the modernized system as opposed to PUA fraud, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Specifically with that, and really I think the multi-factor authentication is a good first step in combating that. So I thank you for that.
So what we folks know, we have ID.me in the system, and there are various gates where a claimant would have to go through ID.me if they're changing their bank account information, the reopen process, if they have forgotten their password. We have the multi-factor authentication, and in October of 2022, we had all claimants go through ID.me again as a final step. I won't comment publicly on the security measures in the system or the integrity of the system, but I will say that we are vigilant in monitoring any perceived or real threats to claimants' information, and we remain on alert always. I think the pandemic has changed the nature of the fraud in the unemployment compensation program, whereas prior to the pandemic, identity theft wasn't as common as it had been during the pandemic. What you referenced with respect to having your bank account information changed, seeing that as a new type of fraud. So we remain vigilant in ensuring that the use of ID.me, the use of multi-factor authentication, and the system's built-in security measures are as fulsome as possible.
And I appreciate that. And ID.me was contracted as a tool to help combat fraud and to identify if claimants are actually who they say they are. And during its rollout for Pennsylvania, I had several constituents who had issues trying to identify themselves. Some were stuck in limbo for hours waiting to speak with that live person. Others had issues with a lack of connectivity and technology. I even had one person who told me they were going to just go out to that ID.me headquarters because they were unable to be verified. So have those issues been worked out? If claimants need additional verification and don't have access to that mobile phone, computer, internet service, or even a video call, are those claimants able to be
Sure,
connected?
so a couple points. I want to make it clear that ID.me is for those claimants who use the modernized system. But if I say that you can call us and you can file your application that way, you're facing an 1.5 hour wait time. So my saying that is meaningless because folks have to sit on the phones and wait to get through to a live person. We have had our career links receive from us guidance on how to manually verify an individual's identity. Whereas if someone comes into the career link with a primary and a secondary form of identification, such as a social security card and a driver's license, and the person in the career link can complete a form, send it back to us, and we will annotate their claim appropriately in the
Great.
system. For purposes of ID.me, they also have the ability to go directly to a trusted referee to verify your identity. But again, that is someone who is comfortable with technology, has the technology. If you don't have that, I think that again reinforces the importance of the UC Connect program and having folks answer calls in real time.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I know that we're running short on time, but have you been successful in recovering those fraudulent overpayments made during the pandemic, and have any indictments or prosecutions occurred as a result?
So with respect to the prosecution of fraud during the pandemic, it's important to differentiate between the fraud in the federal programs versus regular unemployment compensation fraud. Programs such as PUA, PEUC, FPUC, MEUC, they were funded by federal dollars. We are obligated to report to United States Department of Labor, Office of Inspector General, any possible fraud that has occurred because they have the right of first refusal, so to speak, with respect to prosecutions. And in fact, they have. Working in conjunction with OIG, our Commonwealth's Attorney General, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, we have a great partnership with all of those law enforcement agencies.
And here in the Commonwealth?
Yes,
For our unemployment compensation fraud, those hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions that went out because multi-factor authentication was not turned on, where do we stand with that?
So that, with respect to the fraud in the regular unemployment compensation system and what you are referring to, that's currently under investigation at the federal level, and I can't comment on specifics about that.
I appreciate that concern, but I will just say this because we are short on time. Taxpayers here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, they really don't care if it's at the federal level or the state level. They're paying all of those taxes out of the same wallet, and so regardless of what pot those dollars came out of, we need to be accountable and we need to be guardians of all of those funds.
Absolutely.
I thank you so
Yes.
much for your
Thank you.
for your answers here today.